She comes from a law enforcement family. She married into a law enforcement family. Her husband was a police officer who died of work-related cancer. She's here to talk about how that impacted her life, her new life afterwards, and her new mission today. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Calling us from Southern California, we have Vickie Speed on the phone. Vickie is from a law enforcement family. Her brother, I believe, is a retired Los Angeles Sheriff's Department deputy, and she married into a law enforcement family. Her husband was a law enforcement officer, and sadly, he passed away due to work-related cancer. We'll talk about that in a few moments. Thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated, Vickie.
Gosh, what a great honor, Jay. Thank you so much.
It's so important that people like you come on. And by the way, earlier, we did an interview with her partner, Tanya, and a heartbreaking story of what she and her family went through with the death of her husband in the line of duty. And before we start the conversation about your story, I want people to understand something, that a lot of men I worked with, I say men, that's men and women, a lot of the guys, many have died from cancer. One of the districts I worked in, it had been shut down due to asbestos, and many people had cancer and died very young. It's heartbreaking. My father died of lung cancer many years ago. It was one of the worst things I've ever been through. Seeing them deteriorate and go through that, it's difficult. And for me, I just get kind of used to it. It is, over these years, it doesn't get easier to deal with.
I agree with you on that. For us, it was so completely just came from left field. Didn't even see it coming. So it was a very big blow for my family.
And he had been a law enforcement officer for a while, hadn't he?
He had been on 16 years. My husband actually got in the department very late in life, what's considered late in life. He was 36, so he was the oldest in his academy class, and it had been a lifelong dream. And my husband it's kind of funny, had been told at a very young age not to apply because they would never take him. And, we forget the power of words. That really stuck with him. But after seeing my brother with his career and just knowing that was his dream, my husband actually applied for the department and took the test without telling anyone, including myself.
So that was a surprise. And by the way, I got hired, right?
Yes, he actually stopped by my office on a Friday, which he never came by my office. And he said, I need to tell you something. And then you hear those words and you think, oh, my God, he's leaving me. He said, I took the test for the sheriff's department this morning, and I passed, and I need to be back in the morning, and I have to buy a suit, and I need your help. And, my jaw dropped, and I was like, what did you just say? First time ever I'd even heard about this, or that it was even a dream.
This is one of the things I love about this show. It's breaking stereotypes. In Hollywood, they put out these stereotypes about law enforcement, police alike, and your story, your husband's story, breaks that shit. He started this career late in life. He was the grandpa, is what we call those guys in the academy in their late 30s. Because I was 20 when I started.
Yes, they called him that. They called him Grandpa. It wasn't Dad, it was Grandpa.
That's what we called each other. The old guys in their 30s. Now, I can't even remember being 30, to be honest with you. It was so long ago. So you had a life together that didn't involve being in law enforcement. And was this a huge upheaval for you?
Yes and no. My husband's background was construction, heavy equipment. He'd done that his whole life. They had a family business. And at the time, he was a heavy equipment operator for the federal government, and he was very unhappy in his job. And it was affecting our marriage. But my husband was also a country singer, and he was very close to getting signed. And so to go from this to I just applied for the sheriff's department and I'm following my dreams was, I mean, you could just imagine. And at the time, we had a 3-year-old at home. So, it's like, what? Wait, what? But, we had gone through some difficulties already in our marriage. Especially with the band and the weekends and the late nights in the bars and the drinking, and we had done all that already. And I always just wanted to support my husband in whatever he did, including pursuing country music. But that was kind of a big thing. No matter where we were at in our marriage, we always supported each other. Because, you can come up with some crazy ideas, but we all know we have dreams. And for him, that was his dream.
Quite a while ago, I had a guest on the show who immigrated to Nashville, Tennessee, from Canada. He was a country artist, and he performed for a very long time. And right around the same age as your husband, decided he wanted to become a police officer. And by the way, still writes music and performs as well. So it's ironic that on two different sides of the country, almost the same age in life, they took the same career path.
Wow. Okay, that's crazy. Well, then I'll go a step further. They discovered my husband sang while he was in the academy. They did random car searches, and they happened to search his car in the parking lot one day, and his CD was in there.
No.
So my husband actually was known he sang the national anthem and American Lawman on a regular basis for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He sang at Dodger Stadium. He was honored, probably the greatest honor of his life, was my husband sang at the funeral of Sergeant Steve Owen.
Oh, wow. Well, one of the things, when the Academy, being in his late 30s, being called Grandpa, we would have ridden him hard about that. But if we're doing a car stop exercise and saw a CD that he recorded, I'm telling you, I know he got a lot of ribbing over that.
Yes, he did.
I mean, we could be ruthless with each other. My wife, we'll get back to your story about my wife. When we have these police get-togethers and reunions, and we are so hard on each other, but we love it. And the camaraderie is something I missed tremendously after retiring. But she sometimes, in the early days, would be shocked that we kidded each other so hard and insulted each other, but it was all good-natured, and we all loved it.
Yes, the bond that you guys created. I never experienced that. I wasn't a wife that spent time at the station or got involved with law enforcement, or I just was never that wife. I had my own career, and we had a family, and it worked for us. All wives are different, but I will tell you, I learned the side of that the day my husband was diagnosed, and honestly, I live it now, even when he's gone. That blue blood runs so thick, and they really are my law enforcement and the sheriff's department. They're not just my family. They're my saving grace since my husband died, honestly.
We are talking with Vickie Speed. This is the Law Enforcement Show. When we return, we're going to talk about the diagnosis of cancer, the work-related cancer, and how it cost her husband his life, and what happened to her afterwards and her family, and what she's doing today. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Did you know that there are people earning $30,000 or more per month from Meta or Facebook? Did you know that you can too? All without breaking the time bank. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. Newsbreak is your #1 local news app for current events, free live news for you and your community. Download the Newsbreak app today for free, and be sure to follow the Law Enforcement Talk radio show and podcast on the Newsbreak app. This is the Law Enforcement Show return conversation with Vickie Speed. Vickie's husband was a law enforcement officer. He developed cancer work-related cancer and died as a result of that. And we went to break. We're talking about him as an individual. He went into police work late in life, and he's also a country music artist as well, which we talked about, the ribbing and the teasing and all the good-natured fun we would have. But here's where it gets serious. You, at some point, found out he was sick, and you got the diagnosis. I just got a phone message from my mother the other day about an uncle, much, much older, and he's got cancer. And right away, my first reaction, Vickie, is to go, it's my dad dying all over again. And I almost like shut down. I don't want to deal with this. How did you all find out?
Wow. Well, finding out about cancer was just, it really was a blow to my family. The craziest part is, and you know this being an officer, my husband was a hard charger, and he was a 24/7 hard charger. And he really thought the stressors of the job were getting to him because he was getting older and because he'd always 150 miles an hour. In August of 2015, he had stepped down from a very prestigious unit, and he felt like he was turning 50, that this job was getting the best of him. And I remember he had kind of lost it on one of his partners on this particular day, and my husband was not who he was. And I remember he told me, he said, Vic, just the stress of the job, I think it's getting to me. I think I don't know, maybe it's my age. And I didn't think a lot of it. And, like I said, I always supported his career. So he went to a different unit and very happy. Things were great. And he was training for Baker to Vegas at this time, which he was a runner his entire life. And for those people that don't know, Baker to Vegas is the largest law enforcement run in the world, and it happens once a year. So my husband had been training through the fall, through the winter, and 2016 comes, March. He and my son go to Vegas for this event. Great weekend together, and my husband took one of the, I don't want to say an easy leg because they're not easy, but he took a 5.5-mile leg, flat ground, and he didn't do so well, and that was not my husband. We laughed, made fun of him. Everyone told him, "Oh, Speed, you're an old man. You're turning 50. You're getting too old for this." And that was fuel to my husband. He thought, "Oh, I'm coming back next year, and I'm taking a hard leg." So he came home, and he had told me about it, and then he said, "Vic, about a half mile from the finish line, I wanted to lay down and die. I've never had that happen." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, isn't that crazy?" And I said, "You know what, Mitch, it's because you didn't train as hard." I go, "You'll get him next year." And we laughed about it. This is March. In May, he came by my office, shuts the door, sits down, and I looked at him, and he actually was jaundiced. And I said, "Mitch, what's going on?" And he said, "I got to talk to you." And he said, "Vickie, I haven't been feeling good for a while." He said, "But I really don't feel good." Long story short, 1 week later, we went to the doctor. They'd done some labs, done some other things. They told us we would be having an urgent visit with the City of Hope, which is one of the world's best cancer centers, one of the best here where we live in Southern California. And I still didn't really get it at that point. I knew what it was, but I'm thinking there's just this isn't happening. There's no way. A week later, we went to City of Hope. They did 12 biopsies on him, and Memorial Weekend, I remember it very well. It was a Saturday, and the doctor called. We had a house full of company. My husband and I went back into our office, and he put him on speakerphone, and I remember the words just like they were yesterday. He said, "Mr. Speed, all 12 samples are positive. You have a very aggressive stage 4 prostate cancer. We need to get you in here immediately, and we need to start treatment immediately." And I don't remember anything else that was said. They talked for a few minutes. My husband was as calm as could be, and we hung up the phone, and the room was silent, and I just looked at him, and he was so calm. I think that brought calmness to me. And my husband said, "We will talk about this after our company leaves, but right now we're going to go and enjoy our company, and you and I will talk tonight." And that was the beginning of stage 4 cancer. My husband never returned to work, unfortunately. He did go out IOD, which is injured on duty, because it was work-related. So we went through that whole process. And, crazy enough, you wouldn't know my husband had cancer. He just was just a really strong man. And I think that's a lot of men and women in law enforcement. It's a different mindset. It's a strong mindset. You're a fighter. You've already been trained that if you're going to die because something happens at work, you fight through and you make it.
Right.
And so I knew who he was, and I fed off of him. We were a strong couple. We were, like I said, we had already just been through some really down in our marriage, and we were just at such a solid place when all of this happened. My husband had told me when the diagnosis came, he said, "We will never ask why. We will ask God to use us." And he said, "And I never want to hear anything different from you." And that was standing in the parking lot of our doctor's office. So that was the beginning of the journey, and it was a journey. It was chemo, radiation, drugs, good days, bad days, calling 911, numbers going up, numbers coming down. So for 26 months we did that. And, really by the grace of God, my husband did very well until the beginning of 2018. And then things took a turn. And he really just, they were running out of options is what it came down to. And they started just trying as many treatments as they could. And finally, by April of 2018, he was just in a really quick decline. And, I think you and I talked about it because you have been through, cancer, and you know what it does. It's very tough to watch this. They had told us at that point it was in his bones, and it was more like, what do we do to manage this? What do we do to manage the pain? How are we going to get through this? But I have really strong faith, and I grew up in a Christian home, and, we wavered from it and then came back. And my husband also grew up in a Christian home. I never went to death. I never went to, when my husband got diagnosed, yes, your first thought is, oh my God, how much time do they have? Stage 4 cancer. And I didn't know anybody with cancer. We didn't have family members with cancer. I'd never been through that. So this was really foreign and really new to me. But
we're going to take a short break. We're talking with Vickie Speed. When we return to our conversation, we're going to talk more about the cancer that claimed the life of her husband and how it impacted her family, and what she did afterwards. This is Law Enforcement Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. There's a couple ways you can stay in touch and keep informed of what's going on with the Law Enforcement Talk radio show. Number one, go to our website, letradio.com. Sign up for our email newsletter. It's real easy to find. I promise we don't spam you. I send out about one email every 2 weeks or so. And there's also a feature called Broadcast Channels on our Facebook page, where we send messages directly to your inbox, directly to your messenger. Real easy to sign up for. Make sure you like or follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And up top, you'll see broadcast channels, one for free podcast versions of the radio show, another one top post of the day. So you too can stay informed quickly, easily, and best of all, like always, free.
Imagine contacting millions of people every month using Facebook from the comfort of your home or business. How much would you increase the success of your business or service if you could do that? I do that every day, and so can you. Plus, earn a separate revenue from Meta. Learn how to work smarter and not harder on Facebook. Get step-by-step instructions on what to do and what not to do. Start with a free membership. Get details at letbreak.com. letbreak.com. That's letbreak.com.
Back to our conversation with Vickie Speed on the Law Enforcement Show. Vickie is part of the team Vickie and Tanya, VickieandTanya.com, authors of the book After the Badge. Her husband was a law enforcement officer who died of work-related cancer. And before we had the break, Vickie, you're talking, by the way, I got to say this. Speed as a law enforcement officer's name is phenomenal. Mitch Speed. That you couldn't make up a name like that in Hollywood. If they gave that as a script for a TV show or a police-related movie, the lead character's name is Mitch Speed, we'd all laugh and go, no. That's a great name.
Yeah, it is.
Way.
I'm not gonna lie. It's a cool name.
It's an awesome name, but he was diagnosed with aggressive stage 4 prostate cancer, and the first thought is, that, and it wasn't that long ago, but when I think of prostate cancer, it's not a big deal. They can handle it. People survive that. They live long lives afterwards. Yeah, it's life-changing, but it's not the end of the world. Is that what you thought at first?
I did because, and I'm sure as a man that you know this, and I didn't know this, but prostate cancer is one of the, I don't want to say easy, but it is one of the easiest cancers to control and really give you a long life.
Yeah.
And I had heard that, so I thought, I know my husband, we're good. He's going to beat this.
And he was athletic, and it reminded me of, and I'm not going to use his last name, a guy I worked with in the Baltimore Police Department. He blew out his Achilles tendon playing basketball, and he had to have surgery and have repaired and everything else, and he went through the physical therapy, and he was at the doctor's office being examined, and they're wrapping up that part of his recovery, and he bent over to pull up his shoes or something. The doctor saw a lump on his back and said, "What's that? Hold on." And they did some testing. It turns out, and he was in his early 20s, he had advanced testicular cancer that was all through his body, and within less than a year, he was gone. And it was...
Wow.
And that's the type of thing for men and women. You got to do your self-examination. You've got to. And men, you've got to do it as well. And no one, myself included, wants to have that prostate exam done. Nobody. But get it done.
Well, here's the crazy thing. And most men don't know this. I didn't know this. And I still try and talk about it. If you will ask your doctor to do a PSA test when you're getting your blood work done, which should be your that's really all you need.
Right.
And most men don't know that. They think, oh, my God, I have to go in. And my husband didn't know that. Unfortunately, my husband was adopted, so he had no idea what his family history was. My son does have an edge on this because if your father has it, then you have the gene. And my son does have the gene, so, we have a head start on it, but it's a heck of a way to find out.
Yeah, it is. And unfortunately, and I hate that term when describing this, he goes from the prime of his life, 50, and being a cop is older. And it's tough on you mentally. It's tough on you physically. It's a young person's game. I hate to say it. Men and women, you hit a certain age, we all get injured. We have surgeries. We have all this other stuff. And mentally you just can't quite do it anymore. When he said earlier in the conversation he snapped at a coworker, I remember doing that and still feeling guilty. And it's been 30 some odd years ago. And I said things I never should have said. And I disrespected the person in a way I never should have. And it's because stress, and I say stress, that's an overused term, the trauma and things we went through got the best of me, and I didn't handle it the way I should have. And it was not their fault.
Right. But the great part about you guys are, and men and women both in law enforcement is, and I'm sure it was the same with you, there was an apology from my husband. There was a conversation. That's his brother. That was his partner at the time. So there was a big conversation. And then obviously when he found out he was sick, he realized he really didn't feel good. And that's what made him snap. It was a combination of everything.
So you guys get the bad news and things go from manageable over almost a 2.5 year period to it's not working anymore and things are getting really, really bleak. Yeah,
it came down to a day that the pain was not manageable anymore, and I had to call 911 because it was in my husband's bones. They were afraid that his spine was going to snap because it was moving pretty good at this point. So they asked me to please do that. I did. They admitted him for 10 days. We got the pain under control. But here's the crazy part. The only way to get him home with the amount of medication he was on was to put him on hospice. And that never registered to me because they told me because of the pain meds, there is not a pharmacy around that will fill these because it's an excessive amount. So I thought, okay, so you get hospice just to get the pain meds. Okay. It just never occurred to me. And this was June 8th that he was released, and I had stayed with him the 10 days in the hospital, and the last night I went home. I was going to try and sleep, knowing, we were going to have a rough road ahead of us. And I got back in the morning, and my husband had fell. And, I was like, Mitch, what are you doing? And he said, Vic, I tried to get up to go to the bathroom, and my legs just gave out. I really didn't think anything of it. More, are you hurt? Are you okay? And he said, yeah, I'm okay. But he said, gosh, kind of laughing, I guess I'm weaker than I thought. Okay. So we get in the car, and now, mind you, we talk about law enforcement. The department never left my husband, and the station never left my husband. So we are in a wheelchair. We get outside, and the front of the hospital's lined with black and whites and deputies in uniform, and they're going to help me get him home. So we get him loaded, and I remember he grabbed my hand, and he said, "Vic, please take me home and don't bring me back here. I don't want to come back to the hospital." Still at this point, I'm oblivious, and I said, "Dave, if you don't want to come back to the hospital, we're not coming back to the hospital." He said, "Yeah, I don't want to." I said, "Okay." So we get home, and same thing. My neighborhood is lined with black and whites, and my husband I will say he's weak, and at this point he's in a wheelchair, and it has not occurred to me what is happening. We get him in the house. I end up completely redoing my home, and I move his bedroom to my dining room, and I put him out, where we're living. And I just thought, gosh, if he has to be in bed most of the time, I want him to be with us. Well, when I got him home, our physician's assistant was also a childhood friend of mine who was helping me take care of him. She stayed with me for a couple days, and my sister was also here. And my husband is a big man. He's 6'3", 225. Well, over the next 3 days, my husband had lost complete use. Really, he couldn't control his bodily parts anymore, and he lost complete use of his legs. So within 3 days, my husband was, I'll say it, he was paralyzed from the waist down. And I didn't realize the extreme of what it being in the bones was doing, but I did at this point. And the crazy part is, I still didn't think, oh my gosh, my husband's dying. I thought he's deteriorating, things are getting worse, but it didn't matter. I loved him. I was going to take care of him. So this went on for about a month. My husband did pass on July 7th, and I will say it, the last few weeks was very, very difficult, very painful to watch. The pain was very intense. He was 100% dependent on me. He was bedridden. And, you take this Superman 6'3" hero cop and you see this, and it is difficult. It's difficult to watch. My son was home. He was getting his master's degree, so he was commuting back and forth. And, my son saw this. It's a blessing and it's a curse. This is real life. My son was not a baby. He was 25 at the time. And the reality was he was going to lose his dad, and I was going to lose my husband. So I was thankful that we were both here.
I'm so glad you got to spend that time together. And I think back, my dad was dying. We knew he was dying. He had about a year left, and I got to spend a lot of time with him. And funny thing is, and I don't mean funny as in ha-ha, I insist on watching NASCAR every Sunday, because that's something he and I did together, and it was part of our routine, and it's something I still do, and I don't think I'll probably do that for the rest of my life, and I'm okay with that. This is the Law Enforcement Show. We're talking with Vickie Speed. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page.
First thing in the morning on my phone, I join the Breakfast with Champions morning show in the Clubhouse social audio app. Both are free. I can grab my coffee, no makeup, no hair to do, and connect with people live from all across the world to jumpstart my day. Join us in the Breakfast with Champions rooms in the Clubhouse social audio app.
Online at www.thebwcinfo.com.
This is the Law Enforcement Show. We are talking with Vickie Speed. Vickie's husband was a law enforcement officer in Southern California. His name was Mitch Speed. He was a detective, and he died very sadly from work-related or work exposure cancer in July of 2018. And before we went to break, Vickie, you talked about the very last days that your husband was alive, and then it dawned on you that that this was the end of the road. That had to be a big, I don't know what term to use to even describe it. It had to be a great big moment. Like, what do we do now? Our whole lives, everything we planned on afterwards is all gone.
Right. We actually had a 5-year plan when he was diagnosed for retirement, and we were going to sell our home. We were going to move out of the area. So yes, it was a very, very big change. Something I would like to share, especially for those that have never experienced, the loss of a spouse. One of the things about 2 weeks before my husband passed was, and forgive me if I get emotional, he asked me permission to go home. I remember him telling me, Vic, I have fought so hard and I'm tired and I don't know if I can keep fighting and I just really want to go home, but I need you to tell me it's okay. And, that's probably one of the most painful conversations that we had, but I loved my husband enough to give him that permission. I was watching him suffer. And I knew to say anything else, was extremely selfish. And it just was from a place of love. And I did give my husband that permission. And I knew that he needed it. And, as crazy as it sounds, I think it brought a little bit of peace to me because now we had an understanding of what was happening, where we were at, where this was headed. So I knew it was a matter of time. I knew it would be a very short amount of time. But, death it's never easy. I think we've all experienced it, but I know I've never lost a child, but I can tell you the death of my husband was very painful.
Just hearing you talk about it is extremely emotional. And I didn't know your husband. And the truth is, I really don't know you, but I feel like I do. Because and granted, this is your husband, this is my dad we're talking about, but there's a lot of similarities. And I can understand the emotions. I can't understand the specifics of what you went through. But what I think for me, and this is not a good example, but I'm divorced from my first marriage. Second marriage is phenomenal. But the hardest part about the divorce from the first marriage was the realization that the entire life that we had planned out for each other as a couple was not going to happen.
Right. I think for me, I can't speak for anyone else, and I know Tanya and I have talked about this. It was so difficult because we're so young. My husband was diagnosed at 50, and he passed at 53. And I believe Tanya's husband was the same age when he was executed in the line of duty. And you just I just felt so robbed. We have this perception that, and we all think it, we're going to grow old together. Mitch was my forever. I knew one day one of us was going to go first, but you think, when we're 80 or 85 or, we're going to experience our son getting married, grandchildren, retiring, and you just have this grandeur plan. And, within a minute, life has changed. And that's been hard. That's been difficult.
My wife and I, we joke quite often that who's going to go first and what the other one has to do and all that stuff. And it's a really ha-ha type thing.
Right.
But now when I go home, I'm going to have this conversation with her. We can't do that anymore. They just...
No.
You can't. It's fun. It's something we laugh about. But your conversation, what you went through, it changes the perspective totally.
Oh, wow. And I would even encourage, I'm glad you said that. I really would encourage people to have these conversations, only because, not that I'm blessed that my husband's gone, but I'm blessed that I got this time with him, and we talked about everything. How do I go on? What about our son? What about, what do we do? What do I do financially? What do I do with the house? What do I do with, and I say this as crazy as it is, and I know you've heard Tanya's story. I tell Tanya this all the time. You had a phone call in 15 seconds to literally comprehend everything that was going on, and your whole life changed. By the grace of God, I had 26 months. And yes, we both lost our husbands, but, I got something that she didn't get. And so, yes, I would encourage you to have those conversations.
At some point in this journey you went through, afterwards I'm talking about, there had to come a point where you say, okay, now what do I do? And this is where decision making comes in about what kind of life do I want to have for me and my family. Yes, it's unfair. Yes, we've been robbed. It's not right by anybody's accounting. But how do you make the decision that life's going to go on and we're going to have a good life?
I think a lot of it was the encouragement from my husband. He was an incredible man of God. He had faith to move mountains. And, he really instilled that in his family and myself. So I had that. I knew what he wanted for me. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But I would like to share a very quick story. We talk about a little bit, we've talked about our children and the difficulties that, it's not just you, it's also your kids and the loss for them. This was not the defining moment, but it had been a while coming. But my husband's memorial was July 27th, and on August 11th, my son was arrested for a DUI. Oh. So it wasn't just grief and loss. This was such a huge blow and shock. And, to make things worse, not that there's a good case scenario, he was arrested at my husband's station. So, for me, my first thought was, and I remember saying it, what do I do without him? I need my husband. This is where Dad steps in. This is where he's a law enforcement officer. It's his station. It's, literally, I remember sitting on the couch and going, what just happened? I have to be in this horrible dream. What is happening right now? But, by the grace of God, we got through it. And my son is in such an incredible place in his life. It was a very long 9 months, going to court, everything that came with it. And there were some defining moments because our children do have difficulties also. My son's been in counseling for about a year and a half and really got his faith back. And he losing his dad has been the most painful thing that he's ever experienced, and he does still struggle with it. And so it isn't just me. It affects your children also. And I don't know if Tanya got a chance to share this, but her daughter's getting married in 4 weeks. And, to not have her father walk her down the aisle is, so the pain doesn't stop. The reminder doesn't stop. But you do your best to go on. But for us and for me, it is God's grace and God's love and God's strength. And that's where I draw from.
So you and your partner, you guys co-authored a book together. Tell us about the book.
Yes. It's Tanya Owen and Vickie Speed. And just very quickly, Tanya and I did not know each other. Our husbands worked together, and she knew my husband. And 10 days before Steve's murder, we met at a fundraiser for my husband who was out IOD. And that really was God bringing us together. And we went to Police Week in 2019. She invited me, and we have been inseparable ever since. And it's like we've known each other our whole lives. So she was very close to Mitch, and she was very, and her children, very close with him in his cancer journey. And they spent a lot of time together because my husband wasn't working. So that carried over to she and I and our children. And we actually just have become a big family, which has been incredible. But when our husbands passed, we just felt like, especially with what's going on, and I know this will make a lot of sense for people, you have the rhetoric and you have we hate law enforcement, they're all bad, they're all racist, they're all whatever. Well, we were married to 2 white cops, and neither one of our husbands were any of those things, and actually they were quite the opposite. Both husbands dealt with the worst of the worst on a regular basis. They were not, and there's no put down, but they weren't the guys out just writing tickets. They were in the thick of it every single day. And when they died, this is my greatest story to Sergeant Steve Owen, is they had gang members, prostitutes, drug dealers, young youth really come out on national TV and do interviews about how Steve changed their life.
By the way, check out their book.
On them.
It's called After the Badge, available on their website and where books are sold. What is your website address again before we have to wrap things up? It
is VickieandTanya.com. We're also on Facebook. Vickie and Tanya, and we're on Instagram, and that's at Vickie and Tanya.
And thanks so much for being a guest on the show. Very much appreciated. Please stay in touch.
Yes, and we would love to send you our book, so we will get in contact with you, and thank you for this incredible honor.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and Podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.